Hey everyone and welcome. So today me and Sam are going to be talking about AR and VR technology and whether it's actually good or bad for the environment. Before we get into it, I have a little game to show. This game is quite cool. As you can see, this is why people are into this type of stuff. But that's also kind of the whole point, is what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm Jacob, and I'm here to tell you why this technology, as cool as it is, it's low-key an environmental nightmare.
And I'm Sam, and I'm here to tell you why there's cons or pros to what Jacob is saying.
Yeah, so we'll let you decide who's right by the end of it. So let's get into it. So here's the thing that people really don't think when they strap on like a Meta Quest or use some AR app is that all of this requires a massive amount of energy to actually run. Like it's not just your headset doing the work. There's entire data centers, 5G networks, servers. All of it is just running constantly in the background just to make your experience smooth. And all this infrastructure comes with a huge amount of power. And the wild part is that most people, they don't even realize that this is happening. You put on the headset, you go into your virtual world, you have no clue what's even going on behind the scenes. Also, the costs, they're invisible, so you don't really know what it is from up close. There's also this kind of an ironic situation happening where companies are using AR and VR technology specifically to raise awareness about environmental issues. For instance, virtual nature experiences, climate simulations, that's the kind of thing. But to run those kinds of experiences, you're consuming the same energy and resources that are contributing to those problems in the first place. It's a little contradictory. Now the second issue, and this is one that I think is actually worse, it's the e-waste and what happens to the hardware itself. So to build these devices in the first place, you need rare earth materials. And extracting these materials causes deforestation, water contamination, and tons of carbon emissions. And most of that mining happens in places with weaker environment regulations, so that damage is basically out of sight, and it's out of mind for the average consumer. So then once you have the device, upgrade cycles, they're quite fast. New headset drops, your old one loses software support, you buy a new one, and the old one still ends up in a landfill and it's just junk by that point. These devices aren't really easy to recycle either. The toxic materials inside them leach into the soil and the water. It's a real problem that the industry just doesn't talk about enough. Alec Kafiri, a researcher that I found, he puts it pretty bluntly in his review. The environment costs of hardware production, things like minimal extraction, short device life cycles, and the lack of recycling, they're constantly overlooked. And how these companies talk about sustainability, they also focus on the cool stuff that the tech can quietly do, which also ignores the cost to make it. So now, what the core ethical issues for me in this is that the people bearing the environment costs of AR and VR, they're not really the same people benefiting from them. The mining happens in vulnerable communities. The e-waste ends up in places with no infrastructure to handle it. And future generations inherit its mess. It's not really fair, and I think it's worth taking seriously. So now I'll let Sam talk about her mind now.
Yeah, okay, so Jacob made some pretty important points, but I think there's also some other factors that about the technology and like its use and what it could actually do in the future as well. So there's two core like obstacles that are standing in the way of the pros, which one of them is like a psychological distance. This is when like people understand that climate change is real, but it feels like too far from like their world or like societally it feels so far, so it doesn't look like it truly has like an impact on their lives. This is kind of where AR and VR kind of offer something a little different. So first, it kind of reduces psychological distance. Rather than reading about like environmental issues and consequences on like articles, users can actually experience them in these first-person immersive simulations. And this kind of creates emotional engagement with these environmental issues that passive media doesn't really do. And second, it kind of addresses the helplessness problem by giving users agency. So in virtual greenhouse simulations, people can interact with the environment and then they can test decisions and test different like experiments and see what are the outcomes. And these like hands-on experiences can kind of shift this mindset from, oh, this is like an issue that's too big for me to handle to like, oh, my actions actually have a consequence and they have an action or they have an effect. And this can lower the barrier to behavior change significantly. It bridges knowledge gaps, so complex ecological systems and these like cause and effects relationships are kind of hard to communicate through like text or traditional media, but then VR and AR kind of like help make those relationships kind of like visible and interactive. And then finally, AR and VR are kind of experimental more than like ideological, so it kind of has this potential to cut across the social and political divides that typically block environmental messaging from like actually making an impact. And this research backs us up. So immersive experiences produce stronger emotional impact and better memory retention compared to passive learning. So the key mechanism is that the shift from this like observer role to this participant role, when someone like interacts with the environmental or with a virtual environment and sees the result from their actual choices, they stop feeling like a bystander and they actually feel like they have an impact on what the issues are addressing. And the barriers to sustainable action are kind of real. AR and VR don't really like eliminate them, but it kind of like shows and like targets these three in a way that there are like no other medium like any other medium actually addresses.
Okay, so I actually really like your psychological distance framing. That's genuinely a compelling argument, but I kind of have an issue with it. You're describing what AR and VR can do in a sustainability context. Most people aren't really going to use it that way. Like they're gaming, they're watching content, they're messing around with AR filters. So the people actually experiencing those climate simulations, like who are they? Because it's not the average consumer.
That's fair, but the point is that infrastructure exists to deliver that kind of like impact at scale. So the potential is real, even if the adoption isn't really there. And there's an argument of for investing in these kind of applications, not just to like abandon the technology.
Okay, yeah, but I don't really think like my argument is that the technology has no upside. It's that right now, like today, the harm is happening. It's not really being accounted for. The mining, the e-waste, the energy draw, that's like present tense. The climate simulations changing people's behavior at scale. That's really future tense. And right now, these costs, they're falling on communities that have nothing to do with any of this.
Which is why I feel like the design and policy situations that you mentioned earlier kind of like matter. For this production side, I think reducing the footprint and then the main objection kind of goes away.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's where we actually agree. Like, this tech isn't the problem. It's the way the industry treats its environment responsibility. That's the main problem.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of where we land, where the technology has real potential to help the environment, but it's not really being used that way. And yeah.
Right, yeah, like you can't use AR and VR to solve environmental problems while ignoring the environmental problems you're creating to run them. You have to fix the hardware, fix the energy, and then, yeah, this tech could actually be worth it. So thank you for everyone who's watching this.
We hope we give you something to think about.
And if you've made it this far, go touch some grass. You've earned it.
What's up, y'all? We're back with another philosophical argument about virtual reality. Here, we're going to start off with social isolation. Me personally, I'm under the perspective that social isolation is increased with virtual reality because, similar to social media, virtual reality will increase the amount of widespread and harmful behavior of individuals online, thereby marginalizing communities and contributing to discrimination in the real world. What do y'all think?
Oh, I definitely disagree with that. Like, guaranteed I disagree with that because I feel like with VR, people can now like interact with each other, in a shared virtual space while looking at each other to, feel more connected deeply inside.
And it's not much different than like FaceTime or anything that we have now. It's just they interact differently within the space.
Do you not think that the way they go about their interactions in the virtual space would alter, and thus alter the way that they interact in the real world?
Why do you think that?
If individuals were under a different avatar or visual perception, they could be perceived by other individuals in a different manner than to what they're used to in the real world.
And why would that be bad?
Why would that be bad?
Yeah.
If you were portrayed as a larger character in the game, if you were portrayed as a larger character in game, you would be treated in a different way, which could lead to negative mental health issues.
But you could just change your avatar.
Yeah, like why would you, purposely change your avatar to something that will give you...
Fair, but why do they need to have to reduce that sense of authenticity? You're telling me that their expression should be limited?
They can do whatever they want.
Yeah,
like
they can do their free will.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever they want. They can be who they want. And
it's
whatever
not,
makes
it's
them
not
feel
forcing
happy.
them into like something that's harmful necessarily. It's like they have the option to do whatever they want within like extended reality.
Fair.
So I feel like with that one, it's just kind of like up to the user.
Definitely agree with that. Fair point.
All right, moving on to bioethics, as virtual reality or augmented reality has been used to help with mental health issues, placebo effect sort of therapy. What is y'all's take on how it has impacted
Mental
bioethics and
bioethics.
Yeah. Bioethics, just for those that don't know, the principles of bioethics are autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. And since VR could be used as a tool to treat health issues, VR itself should adhere to principles of biomedical ethics alongside the developers of the tech as well. So the tech, alongside the actual institutions that are creating it, both have to be held responsible.
So as a part of the ethical debate, like they're saying, like what specifically are they saying that violates? Like for those?
What do you mean?
Like what about VR? Like
Is violating the bioethics.
Like, are you just saying that it would need some regulations, or are there specific things like within just like extended reality that?
So yeah, virtual reality has issues with addiction and escapism. Escapism, again, for those that don't know, is a maladaptive strategy of playing video games to escape from real life problems. And becoming immersed in video games and entertainment media can be dangerous. It limits people's ability to keep track of and focus on things that are important in real life. If that's not attributed by the developers or the tech itself, I feel like that has some ethical issues in terms of applied ethics, right? Applied ethics.
I feel like that's less of like an issue with like the technology itself though, and more like how people decide to use it. Because like for like you could say the same thing about video games. Like people like ignore different things in their lives to just go play video games and stuff. And like at the same time, like why would interacting with like a virtual world be necessarily like bad? It's just like virtual. You know what I mean?
That is true.
Fair, but so yeah, essentially, study by High et al. They discussed how relative to 2D video games, VR games are capable of intensifying negative emotions elicited during gameplay, and that these emotions persist beyond the gameplay experience. So compared to 2D video games, virtual reality has a much more stronger impact on the individual's mental health. So
Because you're like interacting with
correct.
it
It's
more.
a
Like
it's a more personal experience. Like your conscious shifts in a way versus playing a 2D video game.
But then couldn't you say that it could also like provide them with better experiences, like depending on what they decide to interact with, like they could also use it as like a way to
That's
de-stress
fair.
or something, like disconnect from the world if they need to for a
Yeah,
bit.
I would agree, but that disconnection has some problems because the technology itself is in the hands of a user that's not necessarily in the best mental headspace and they're escaping, that has problems.
That's true, and like also like what people could probably access using it,
Yeah.
like maybe unintentionally. But yeah, is there anything for like kind of the cons of the mental health side? Like, are there any specific debates that kind of have to do with that?
Yeah, so essentially this paper that I found by Michael Madari and Thomas Mechender discussed how ethics behind research involving non-maleficence, like I said, with bioethics. And so research involving non-maleficence leads also to the potential of maleficence, thus creating a difficult ethical dilemma. So for example, if you were to study the psychological impact of being an avatar or interacting in a different world that's not the same as your own, that could lead to psychological impacts. But just performing the research on its own to study that has ethical issues. So I wanted to know what you guys take on that one.
So like even just like as they're trying to study the technology, they're
Yeah.
having issues like ethical issues with it. Okay.
Exactly.
I mean,
I'll cut in real quick. There was a quote that kind of emphasized that. They said, "No experiment should be conducted using virtual reality with the foreseeable consequence that it will cause a serious or lasting harm to the subject." Which, as the paper goes on to discuss, a lot of issues are unforeseen because the technology is so new.
Okay, so it would be like a
I see
normal
that as a
study,
problem.
just like testing things
Yeah,
out.
but
But like
if-
if they like expected there to be like negative consequences, they couldn't.
Correct. They can't see that at all.
So they can't do a study for the negative consequences because like they don't want to like cause them.
Yeah, and
Okay.
if we bring it back to good old Immanuel Kant, looking at using people as a means, that could technically be using them as a means in terms of trying to figure out the results of what mental health effects the studies will show.
Well, then why can't they just do regular studies and then?
Well, would you not want to study virtual reality with virtual reality?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat?
Like,
Could you repeat?
what do you mean by regular studies?
Like without the intent of having like negative mental health. Like,
Well, that's what I
because,
mean,
like,
is
because what
that
would happen if like you were
there's-
just to do a test and like what happens if there are actually just like no negative consequences of it? Like why would you expect them?
Then
to be-
all the better. But all I'm saying is the fact that there's consequences that they can't see. They can't even predict that. So they don't know if there's a negative consequence that could happen.
But that's with everything.
Not necessarily.
Really.
You can prepare for it in different ways than with VR.
Mm-hmm.
VR is not like a natural circumstance.
Yeah. But neither is like AI or anything.
Fair.
Like other technologies, I feel like that was the same issue with it.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's kind of needed a little bit for progress. Like low key. Like
Yeah.
I feel like we can be a little bit.
You know, we gotta be careful with that. You know what? Some people might have to have some issues.
Wait, you know what? But like, I think overall it could be so helpful because if you think about how it could improve mental health treatment in like the long term, like if you were to do it right, like,
Yeah,
like
I
isn't there a
mean-
lot of stuff with mental health treatment?
I feel like we should like look at the benefits, you know, instead of the like too much on the cons.
But
Mhm.
would I argue that looking at ethics, you're supposed to be focused more on the negative effects of something, no?
I mean,
If,
yeah,
if
but-
you're deciding whether something's ethical, would you not be deciding if it is bad first before you decide if it's good?
Well, I think it depends on which like approach you take. So if
Yeah.
you're thinking like utilitarian or like,
Fair.
you could think like, oh, what overall good.
Yeah.
like there's many studies that like shows that like VR exposure can like trigger very
Second one.
real emotional responses, you know, without any actual, you know, real life danger. So I feel like that benefit alone can help out participants like a lot.
And NIH has done studies on that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh.
There's the source.
It's just I think it's ethically helpful, you know, for mental health because it gives people a more safe and controlled environment, you know, to manage their emotions and improve their, you know, general well-being. You know, what I mean, like VR could be used in therapy, right? Right, therapy to recreate those stressful environments, but you know,
Would you?
no real danger.
So for
You
like
mentioned
exposure therapy and stuff,
Yeah,
but like,
yeah.
You mentioned a controlled environment.
Controlled environment, yes.
Would you not argue that there's ethical issues in regards to the creator of the environment?
like,
That
the,
if
so
this-
are you saying like
there's-
the
there
person
would
who
be, would you not argue that there's a power dynamic there between the developer of the whatever it is, the app, the service, whatever it may be,
Sure.
between that person and the user because they have a sense of control over their emotions? Hang on, let me source one.
Yeah, yeah,
Source one real quick.
I think it really depends on the application, and like if you're thinking of like less like if you're stepping away from mental health treatment and stuff like that, and you're thinking more like simulations,
Yeah.
like if you think about it, there are like a whole bunch of trainings and simulations that are like not very safe, especially like in the military and stuff, and like VR would improve that by like a lot, and I think it's more ethical to like.
There's absolutely areas in which it can be applied.
And I don't. It's not like the person who created the app is like monitoring it like constantly,
Yeah.
like, exactly every single interaction.
I also think
So I feel like it's
like commercial use in terms of people buying a product to use it has much more problems that could get out of hand compared to like medical use or governmental use, like military training, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because obviously, ethically, obviously, I mean, there's problems with killing people, but in terms of like training the military to do their task, I think is ethically responsible because it prepares them for their mission, which is already like threatening. Bringing it back to that, the article from Madari and Metzinger, I talked about how immersion in VR can cause behavioral changes that last after subjects leave the virtual environment, which connecting that back to what I mentioned with the relationship between the developer and the user. If the developer, again, it is an issue with the developer, the ethics of the developer,
Yeah.
but also that applies to the technology itself, because if that were to be unregulated, or if the developer had a way to advertise, like, so that there's a clip from Ready Player One where this company Ion talks about filling the user's interface with advertisements and stuff, and pushing to the limit of potential epilepsy.
We estimate we can sell up to 80% of an individual's visual field before inducing seizures.
And I would argue that has some ethical concerns.
That does have ethical concerns, but that's like the use of it, I think.
Yeah. So, what is your take on that? Because
Yeah.
if, again, on the Kantian side of things and using people as a means to an end, I feel like the technology itself encourages that in a way that's greater than social media because of the biometrics that people are able to pull.
I think it needs to be like regulated for sure. Like I would agree with that because I think the experiences people have with it are real, even if like the
And they're more
environment is
nuanced
not.
compared to the internet.
Yeah, like I think the thing that you said, like where people will leave it and still like have like lasting effects of it, like I think that it's very true that they are real, they are like actual experiences that they're going through. But like that just means that the specific apps need to be regulated. I don't think the technology as a whole needs to just be like
Why ethically?
isn't like ethical. Well, ethically.
Well, I look at also, but I like see it as like, because you're saying how like, you know, like you said earlier, right? Like people leaving it can have lasting effects, right? But I also kind of see that as like a good thing, you know, because like that could mean that, you know, like it's working, you know what I mean? Like because like the changes are the goal, right? Like we're trying to have them, you know, a better mental well-being, you know, like and everything. So this could actually help them like, you know, build more coping skills or like reduce anxiety, you know. So like if their behavior like changes afterward, I say
That could be
that's
good, too.
I say that's a good thing, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I just say like ethically, like as long as you aren't like misusing the technology and like as long as there are some regulations that like guide it to be better, I don't think there's anything like. As long as like the user has a choice in my mind, like ethically, like I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah. Do you
Because
think
they're
there's a
choosing
way?
to have those experiences.
This is something that I came across in my research, but did you think there's a way for the technology itself to alter, to provide the user more autonomy and to kind of even that power imbalance so that the developers aren't able to exercise the user as a means to it?
Like more autonomy within the like
Yeah.
actual applications. Like yeah, I feel like as long as there are things that maybe like let the user know like what experience they're about to head into, there be like no horrible ethical concerns there. I mean, obviously like once you kind of introduce it more to the public and like, people start doing their own applications, it's like harder to regulate. But like
That's where I kind of had some trouble because I thought initially that the like medical usage side of it, and just I guess not medical, but like professional versus casual use, I thought professional would have so much more ethical problems because a lot of it is medically based, and that's a whole different side of it. But when you look at like addiction, when you look at the individualistic experiences of people in a casual manner, like some people might isolate themselves because of the problem. There's a study that said harassment in social IXR, which is a combination of augmented and virtual reality, risks creating a society on and offline where specific people do not feel welcome, and it could become more widespread and harmful than in the traditional web.
they don't feel like
Correct.
they're
Well,
accepted,
and that's-
like in the platform or
Correct, because this is going to go like into ego and stuff. You know, keep that in mind. But like, you have an idea of what you look like and what your traits are, and when that is detached, like you completely develop a new sense of self. And I feel like bringing that into the real world has some problems.
And would
In
you
the
say
sense
it's
that,
like a
in the sense that
completely
there's a
different?
risk of, if you look at it utilitarian-wise, the development of a self separate from, like, let's take me for example. If I played a game or a service or watched a movie or whatever in VR, and that altered my sense of self for the worse, that is not very good utilitarian-wise. Like if I was to play a game where I'm physically manhandling like human people, like choking them to death, and that leads to increased violence in the real world. That has some ethical concerns.
That
utilitarian-wise.
does have some ethical concerns, but why would you want to strangle people in VR?
I'm not-
That's
I'm
like
not
an
saying-
experience that you're having. Like I feel like that's something that you would end up doing anyways because that's like a choice that you're making.
See, that's where it goes to
And-
just like video games.
That's true.
But
Yeah.
video games, the studies that have been shown on that are relatively weak, and VR itself has augmented effects on the sense of self versus.
Alright, wait, should I say like sorry we got kicked out?
Sorry we got kicked out, but this was going to be our response to what
Yeah.
Sam just said. So, like, in terms of like the things with he was like arguing that when there are two separate like personas, like you have you in the real world, the version like of yourself in the VR world, and like you have these two different personas. He was basically arguing that there's like kind of like some conflict there, and like people may like lose their sense of self or like feel a little bit confused about that. But we kind of felt like a little bit differently about it, and we thought that it might actually be beneficial in a way.
Yeah, like I think we feel like it actually will help you like more like discover your true self, like your true identity, right? It's more like a it's more like just like discovering more than like the what's called the cons, you know? Because I feel like with like when you are in this VR virtual reality, right? Like I think it's more beneficial for you.
Because you're put in all these like different experiences that you wouldn't be put in normally in some cases, and so like with this other character, like how you actually have the freedom to kind of do whatever you want within some sort of like VR, AR, extended reality type thing. Like that might actually like help you figure out who you are as a person like more.
Yeah, and there'll be like less questions about who you are in real life. And I want to add that like because he did mention about like let's say like it takes a turn for the worse, where like you like do something bad in the game and you don't want to do it in real life. I feel like that's less connected to like VR, and I feel like that's like you were gonna find that out either way. Like it's I mean sure like it's sped it up a little bit, but this is your true nature, and I think we should look more on the benefit side. Like you can find out much more about yourself through this, and yeah.
So like ethically it's not really wrong, just because like it's just another like it's extended reality. It's just kind of like another way to interact with the world and people around you, and it would actually like help you discover more about yourself in possibly a much safer way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's good.
Hi, Editor Max here. We are now done with the podcast segment of this video, and we will now be performing a skit. Oh, this party is so lit. I'm having such a good time. Oh my god, is that Phoebe from my favorite class, Technology and Human Values, Philosophy 1145? Oh wow, I should go and say hi.
Yo, this party is lit, bro. Look at how... Who the heck is that? Why is he waving at me? Am I supposed to know him? What? He's coming over? Oh shoot. If only there was a way to remember his name. The way? What the heck is this? Recognized Phoebe? Oh my god, that means I can use it on him. Hey bro!
Hi Phoebe!
Let's take a selfie. Let's take a selfie. Let's take a selfie. Oh. Recognized Max. Hi Max. How are
Phoebe,
you?
what's up? It's
How
so
are
nice seeing you here. Phoebe, guess what? There's a cute guy over there for you. Look, there he is.
Oh, he is pretty cute.
Hey, wait, let me just check to make sure he's not a predator. Hey, what's up, dude? Come over here. How you doing? Oh god, Phoebe! No, run!
So it looks like surveillance is a rising topic in the world of technology. However, I think that a lot of alarm around surveillance is because of the confusion between what it actually is and things like police monitoring, which are actually really different.
Thank you, Phoebe. Surveillance seems to get twisted around a lot nowadays. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, surveillance is the careful watching of a person or a place, especially by the police or army, because of a crime that has happened or is expected to. Now, when a company shows you an ad for running shoes because you searched for a 10K race on Google, that's not surveillance in any meaningful sense. It's personalization. Conflating the two is a little bit intellectually dishonest, and it makes it impossible to have a clear conversation.
I'd say the opposite. That distinction lets companies off the hook way too easily. The mechanism is the same. Persistent, covert data collection on your behavior, interest, location, who you talk to. The fact that it's a corporation and not a cop doesn't make the power asymmetry any less real. In fact, companies have fewer legal constraints than the government does.
But there's a meaningful difference in motive, right? A company wants to sell you shoes, and a government wants to control your speech or imprison you, but those aren't really equivalent threats.
They aren't equivalent, but they're not unrelated either. Companies sell data to brokers, brokers sell to insurers, employers, political campaigns. The pipeline between commercial data and the kind of power you're describing is shorter than people think.
Okay, but also, what does targeted advertising actually do? It shows you things you might genuinely want, but is that really that bad? The alternative is getting ads for things that are completely irrelevant to you. In exchange for that mild inconvenience, you get YouTube, Gmail, Google Maps, and searching, essentially for free. For most people, that's an enormous positive.
A few problems with that. First, free is doing a lot of work there. You're paying with your data, just not with money. Second, the effectiveness of targeted advertising is genuinely contested. A lot of people find it creepy rather than helpful, and there's evidence it actively backfires. Third, and most importantly, advertising is not just product promotion. It's political ads, it's health messaging, it's content designed to provoke outrage because outrage drives engagement.
On the political point specifically, the evidence that targeted advertising actually swings political opinion is pretty thin. There was a large-scale study on Facebook and Instagram deactivation before the 2020 election. The effects on political polarization, candidate favorability, and voter turnout were all close to zero. If this stuff were really bending democracy, you'd expect to see it here.
That study is interesting, but one study on one election in one country isn't a clean bill of health for the whole industry, and it looked at deactivation, meaning people already embedded in these platforms. That's not the same as asking whether the long-term architecture of these systems shapes what we believe and how we see the world.
Here, the problem isn't the technology. It's the governance, it's the regulations. I think the answer is better law, not no VR. Better law just like we have regulations for taking health data and financial data. I think it's no different for VR. As long as we can have good law, then we can have safe and responsible use of this information.
Better law is great in theory, but regulation consistently lags technology by years. In the meantime, this data gets collected, stored, potentially hacked or leaked, or used in ways people never imagined when they clicked agree. And the terms of service are so convoluted that calling user consent informed is basically a fiction.
I actually think VR could go in a healthier direction if companies compete on privacy as a feature. We've already seen this with things like Apple making privacy as a selling point. If users really do care about this, and there's some evidence that they do, market pressure can do work that regulation can't do fast enough.
Apple is a useful example, but it's also a company with a $3 trillion market cap that can afford to sacrifice ad revenue. Most platforms can't or won't, and network effects means users are trapped. If everyone you know is on a VR platform, opting out really isn't a choice. Can we even consent to any of this?
I think for the most part, yes. Adults make trade-offs all the time with not perfect information. For example, it was just the other day where I met someone who, for the first time out of anyone I've ever met, read all the terms and conditions before signing up for every single technology like Instagram, Facebook, or any software technology. He reads every single term and condition. And so the fact that consent isn't perfect, the fact that most people don't necessarily look through every single term and condition, does not mean it's meaningless. For most people, if you give them a straightforward summary, yes, we track your behavior, we show you the relevant ads, and you get the service for free, most people would say yes to that deal.
But that's exactly what they're not given. They're given a 40-page legal document designed to obscure rather than inform. And even if consent were clean, can you really consent to the uses of your data that haven't even been invented yet? Predictive profiling for mental health risks, insurance discrimination, political targeting, these weren't on the table when people signed up for Facebook in 2007.
The predictive profiling concern is real, but it's also worth noting that a lot of these uses are already illegal. Employment discrimination, insurance discrimination based on protected characteristics. The problem there isn't surveillance capitalism, but it's inadequate enforcement of existing law.
Inadequate enforcement because lobbying by the same companies we're talking about has systematically weakened that enforcement. This isn't a coincidence. The same corporations that profit from the data collection also spend enormous sums making sure the rules stay toothless.
Now you're talking about the issue of political corruption, not the technology or the business model. See, those are solvable problems through democracy, the political corruption, I mean. You can do campaign finance reforms, stronger antitrust laws, independent regulators. You are arguing for fixing government, and I absolutely agree. I'm 100% there with you. And I think in all of that, that doesn't necessarily follow that you have to ban VR and AR. I think your argument is to fix government, and you're blaming VR in the process.
Here's what I want people to take away. The conversation about surveillance capitalism is not science fiction, and it's not just about ads. It's about who gets to know everything about you, your fears, your health, your politics, your relationships, and what they can do with that knowledge. As VR makes data richer and more intimate, stakes go up, not down. We need to decide, as a society, what kind of power we're comfortable handing over before we're in too deep to change our minds.
And finally, not everything has to be perfect. The commercial internet, for all its flaws, has democratized access to information, tools, and community in ways that were not imaginable 30 years ago. And most of that runs on targeted advertising. So we shouldn't burn the answer down, and we should govern it well, empower users with real choices, and keep pressure on companies and lawmakers alike.
I'll just add, be specific about what you're afraid of. Surveillance capitalism as a monolith is too vague to fight. Targeted ads are different from political micro-targeting, which is different from biometric data harvesting in VR, which is different from government surveillance. When we're specific, we can actually build solutions, and when we're vague, we can just frighten people without